One Question is brought to you by Turnkey Search, a top industry search firm since 1996. Western Kentucky Athletic Director Todd Stewart is our guest today on One Question. And Todd, let's start with this rather narrow question as it applies to coaching searches. But I think given your response, we'll be able to dovetail this into some other topics around what for most athletic directors is one of the most important challenges, but also one of the most important duties that they face, which is, of course, hiring new head coaches that can create a first-class student-athlete experience, win games, help drive revenue, etc. When you've gone through a coaching search and you've identified who you are going to hire, and you've interviewed a number of people, you've vetted a number of folks, you've talked to recommendations and that sort of thing. Once you've identified who you are going to hire, who specifically within that search committee should be the administrator who follows back up with, let's say, your finalists and says to that coach, look, here's where we're going to go. Appreciate you being a part of this. Really loved your profile here. We are going to hire XYZ. Who should be the administrator who does that step?
Well, with us, most of the time it's actually myself. I just feel like you owe that as a courtesy. You've interviewed people. You've had very candid conversations with them. It's been very revealing on both sides, and I think through the process, you've established some credibility, and because both sides have been honest and transparent with one another, I feel like even though it's not a fun conversation to make, as a courtesy for the person, what they've shared with us, their interest in us, that they should actually hear from me as to the direction we were going and it not involving them.
And what's the time like usually in those situations? Is it within a couple hours of you coming to head on who you're going to hire? Is it within 24 hours, 48 hours? What do you like to stick to?
Well, what we want to make sure is that the person we are hiring, that agreement is ironclad. That obviously we offer the job, they accept it, we agree on the contract terms. Any of those major things that might slow you down. Once we agree on those, and I would call it ironclad, that person has agreed to all the terms, then immediately after that, you start calling the other people that you talk to, that are still, as far as they know, in the mix, so that they hear it. I think the key is so that they hear it from you before they hear it from the media or they hear it by a press conference or a press release.
And commonly, the feedback you receive from the candidates who were not your final choice, do they usually say, hey, is there anything I could have done better in this process, or let's keep in touch? What's the common response in those conversations?
There's a little bit of that. The very first time that I ever did this and I called people, I wasn't really sure what the reaction would be. I mean, I knew that they would be disappointed, but I wasn't really sure. And really what I have found in almost every case is that people are very appreciative that the athletic director actually takes the time to call them. And I, don't go into a lot of specifics, but explain kind of generally why we were going in the direction that we were going. Those conversations actually, although difficult in terms of the news you're delivering, have actually been pretty good. And what I do is I ask them if they have any questions, and in some cases they ask what you just said. Is there any one thing I don't have that the person you're hiring has? Or they may ask, like, for in the future, is there something that I should present differently than what I did? And I'm always honest about that. And the way we leave it is, obviously, we were very serious about this person, and I just remind them that, hey, we all know this is a very fluid business, and you never know when something like this might be coming up again. So let's continue to stay in touch, and if something changes here, obviously we'll talk again. But if I can help you, if you're in the mix with another job, I'm more than happy to talk to that person and let them know how close you were here, and really just offer my assistance any way that I can.
Is there almost an acceptance that the response could include a level of dissatisfaction with the choice? And not that they would, verbally say, like, hey, Todd, you're making a mistake. I don't know, maybe they would. But I feel like a little bit, if you get a guy on the phone and you tell them the result, and they're like, oh, yeah, thanks, Todd, appreciate you letting me know, no problem. I want that person to be a little frustrated or a little displeased with the outcome. Is that something you accept in the conversation sometimes?
Oh, sure. And really, everybody's really pretty professional about it. I mean, I think that it's one of those things where you just agree to disagree. I mean, obviously, anybody who applies feels like they would be the best person for the job, as they should. I mean, you need to have that confidence in yourself and that belief in yourself, because if you don't have that, then you wouldn't succeed in the role anyway. There's really only been one time, and this wasn't even when I was the athletic director. It was when I was the senior associate, and we had a search, and Ross Bjork, who was the athletic director, was calling most of the people, but I was calling a couple of the ones that were involved in that, and that was the only time where the reaction was, I mean, it was literally, wow, really? And then that was it, so that was a little awkward, but those are really few and far between. I think the vast majority of the time, it's actually turned into a pretty good conversation. And obviously there's disappointment, because when somebody gets that far down the line, it's sort of like you can taste it. I mean, it's like being invited to a meal and the table's all set. I mean, you get that close, you really can start to feel what it would be like if you got the job. But I try to spin it into a positive and emphasize truthfully, what their strong suits were, and just to urge them to keep at it, that they'll have their day and time. And we've actually had a number of candidates in there's a lot of sports across the board that candidates that we didn't hire ultimately end up getting head coaching jobs elsewhere, which is, I've been happy to see, because I think it's a profession where we're all in this together. I mean, certainly it's very competitive on the field of play, but I think you still root for people, and you want good things to happen to good people.
And that's today's One Question, brought to you by Turnkey Search, a top industry search firm since 1996. One Question is designed to give D1 Ticker subscribers valuable insights on how executive leaders in college athletics think about key issues on their respective campuses, in their departments, or within their leagues and conferences. One Question is brought to you by Turnkey Search, a top industry search firm since 1996.